The first thing that comes to mind, which I feel bad because I've had a lot of really insanely good mentors in my life, but I think of RuPaul saying, "Live from the inside out," and I carry that with me in my heart. I think that's exactly right. Just you live your life for you are the main character. You are
Yeah.
live for what your values and don't take what the outside world has to say unless it applies to you, you know? I think that's beautiful.
That was the voice of Karly Fischer, general manager of Clowns Like Me, which just closed its off-Broadway run yesterday. Karly was the safety net for absolutely everyone, and if you're not 100% sure just what a general manager is or does in the context of theatrical production, then this podcast episode is for you. I can speak from personal experience. The show would have fallen apart many times without Karly's keen, kind, and generous leadership. In a bit of fun, her bio was provided by her husband Bart, so here goes. Today I am joined by Karly Fischer, Drama Desk nominee, one of Bell Magazine's notable New Yorkers, Columbia Master's Degree holder, published photographer, partner at Mott Fisher Productions, and best mom in the world. She's put up shows like Last Days of Judas Iscariot, the Lortel Award-winning Sweeney Todd, This Beautiful Future, Skittles the Commercial, the Broadway musical, the Pulitzer Prize-winning play The Flick, and most recently Dreams of Dracula, an immersive vampire spectacle staged in the largest dance club in Manhattan, Musica. Unfortunately, I did not get to experience a vampire sucking on my neck while I was up in New York, but I cannot thank Karly and her team enough for all their work on Clowns Like Me. Here we go with my conversation with Karly Fischer. I am here on the Zoom with Karly Fischer. What a delight. Karly, for those of you who have been following me, you may have heard me mention her name a couple times. She was our general manager extraordinaire on Clowns Like Me up off Broadway at the DR2. And she has taken some time out of her incredibly busy schedule to Zoom with me after we figured out the camera to talk about what it means to be a general manager in theater and storytelling and the creative act. And Karly, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you for having me. I can't believe you put a podcast together in all of your not free time.
Yeah, what's funny is a few years ago, in terms of the podcast, Karly, I was guesting into a class for the local college, and they were asking me about directing, and I was just jamming with them, riffing and talking. And one of the students, so I was hip because it was one of the students who said this. They said, "You should have a podcast. I would totally listen if you had a podcast." And I was like, "That's a really intriguing idea." And again, like I said, this was maybe 6 years ago. So I did some quick research, downloaded an app or two. My girlfriend even bought me a microphone, but it was like way beyond my tech skill set.
I hear that. Yep.
But then when I found myself, after I left full-time theater and was freelancing, I stumbled across on one of these lists I'm on, a new piece of online software that I use right now. It's called Alitu, this amazing team out of Scotland, and their website, thepodcasthost.com. I plug them in every closing. They
Nice.
have this all-in-one online app, from the recording to the editing to the hosting to the AI will write you a summary. I mean, it is so slick, and it made it so easy. I can even record it on voice notes with my phone if I'm with someone, and it sounds amazing. It does all the mixing automatically. I'm doing like a big old free commercial here for Alto right now, but that's how it started. So I started this maybe back
Amazing.
in February, March, and it's just fun. I have so much fun.
Wow. That is incredible. Is it expensive?
No, it was like $300 for a year.
No.
Yeah, and it's all of it. It's everything.
That's
So I'm
incredible. I think that's obviously one of the biggest hurdles of having a podcast is no one knows the tech side of it. We all have our ideas, but how would I ever know, you
right,
know?
exactly. So anyway, I want to start because the intro of you that I just read a few minutes ago, pre-commercial, you told me, you sent it to me, and you said that your husband prepared you this intro for a Hot Wings challenge. And if you mean Hot Wings, the show on YouTube, I'm all in with you. He is Sean, he's one of the best
Oh,
interviewers in the business.
isn't he? I know. He like everyone always says on that show, I I can't believe you thought to ask that question, or how did you know about that, or just I mean this really thoughtful deep dive, which is so cool. So we are huge Hot Ones fans, and we for my birthday last year, Bart bought me the entire set. So they sell it, right? And then he created an intro for me, and he edits films. So he set up two cameras, and we sat in our game room and did the challenge. And like he had the questions. It was so fun, very spicy, I will
Oh,
say.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you said you got the whole set, like they sell the sauces they use on the show,
Yeah.
because I remember we got their original and their last dab, that X
Oh,
pepper,
yeah.
holy moly, like, because we did a little challenge with a couple friends, only with like half a dozen sauces. But my girlfriend Rebecca, she has an iron tongue. All of us are sweating and crying and walking around the room just like vibrating, and she's like, "What's wrong with all of you?"
I can absolutely see that about her. I can absolutely see that being truth. I love Rebecca, by the way. She's amazing. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm somewhere in the middle. That one, what? There's the one that like will absolutely slay you. Everyone hates it. They're like, this doesn't even taste like food.
The bomb beyond insanity.
Yes. Okay. So that one is, I mean, it is actually horrible. But because it is so bad, the ones after it do not taste as hot.
Ah, like,
So that's
okay.
how you kind of survive until the end. But there was a time where I was like, can I actually make it all the way through here? But it was very fun. Actually, funny story, my in-laws were visiting. They like spicy things. We're like, we're going to do the challenge with them. So we just we didn't do questions or anything. We just, like laid out the sauce and the chicken or whatever. And they also did not blink an eye. They are like 70 years old, and we're just kind of like, okay. And they were done before I even knew it. It was beyond me.
Key question, Carly. If your husband recorded this, does it live somewhere? Can we go watch your interview and watch you sweat? Is it?
I'll send it to you. Yes, it is. He's edited it and everything. It's
Oh, that's
pretty.
fantastic.
I think he even did the thing where, like, their faces turn red, like they impose the red face or
Yeah.
whatever. I think he even did that, if I recall.
Oh, I can't wait. I cannot wait.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Fantastic. So, married to a video guy, which makes sense because
Mhm.
you are a not just career long, but lifelong theater junkie, right? I think you told me you started doing theater. You've been like working in theater when you were 9.
Yeah, I started
What?
professionally working in theater at 9. So I did acting like every good theater kid does until you do something else in theater. So I actually my first gig, I was 4 and I did a water park amusement commercial. Yeah, just randomly. It was like a local thing. And then when I was 9, I did a play. I'm from Oklahoma. So there's a theater there called Carpenter Square Theater, and they had a production of a play called The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie.
Oh, that's a great book.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Okay. Nice. And so I auditioned for that and got a part. And it was insane because I was in 5th grade, and, I would get home at 11 p.m. every night or 10 p.m. or whatever, and then get up and go to school the next day. And so it
Oh.
was, yeah. So that was like the beginning of a lot of late nights in the theater for me. I got my BFA. I started in acting, and I ended up hating it. It became not fun when it became a career kind of thing. And so I got an undergraduate degree in dramaturgy. And then from
Quick pause.
Mm,
Quick pause, because that's one of those theater buzzwords that those of us in the theater know, but people outside the theater often go, "What? What
yeah,
is dramaturgy?"
dramaturgy is wow, I have a lot of jobs that need explaining. That's interesting. So dramaturgy is essentially, it can be very academic. It's taking, and it can fall into many forms. It's essentially coming in, taking a play, really looking at the bones and the meat of it and the structure of it, and sort of advising and consulting with the actors, directors, producers on that. A dramaturg comes in really handy on a historical piece to say, this would be historically accurate in this moment, this would not, whatever. But they, dramaturgs also go on to be critics or to teach. And, it's this sort of, how theater people come in all shapes and forms. It's this sort of like nerdy academic side of it that
Yeah.
I really love. So, yeah.
Yeah, when I was first taking directing, learning to direct, I was wondering like what it felt. First, it felt redundant or superfluous to have a dramaturg in the room. And sometimes there's like the personalities, and if an actor goes behind your back to the dramaturg and all stuff. Once you get to a certain level, people stop doing that.
Yeah.
But I remember when I finally had the breakthrough for myself of a dramaturg, I agree with you on historical plays and on new plays. I find them invaluable because the way I think about them, my relationship director to dramaturg is you protect the integrity of the world of the play at
Mm-hmm.
every turn,
Yes.
right?
Yes. That is, that really sums it up. That sums up dramaturgy to a T. I mean, I have to be honest, I've only worked with a dramaturg professionally since moving to New York like 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's interesting. They're important, but I don't know that they're still that prevalent in that very traditional way
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah, I agree. And I could see, some producers are like, what is the point? Some directors are like, what is the point? But then I feel like every time they work with one, they say, oh, that's the point. I get it.
Yeah. You make my life so much easier.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's so true.
Okay, so you nerded out with dramaturgy, you had a performance, but then as you started working in the business, the
Mhm.
acting wasn't your bliss anymore. I'm curious about that because this is not an uncommon story, Karly. Like lots of people, like you said, everyone starts as an actor until they discover what they really are in the
Yeah.
theater.
Yes.
What was kind of was there a particular experience or a discovery? Was it the grind of auditioning? Like what kind of pushed you out of the acting lane and into these other lanes that we'll talk about down the road here?
It's interesting. I think it was really from day one. I used to never get nervous when I would perform, in high school and whatever. And then I went to college and all this, there was just so much on the line, right? Because, you're getting a BFA that costs $1 million and you are, and you're like, okay, and I'm going to be an actor and it damn well better work because this is what my degree is in, right? And you're 18 years old and but then but aside from the stakes, because actually for the most part, stakes don't generally scare me, but it just wasn't fun. It just wasn't. It was a lot of I mean, I think when you're doing it in high school, there's a good level of camaraderie there and hubris and it's new and it's exciting but then when you do it every single day, day in
Yeah.
and day out, it's a bit of a grind as well.
Yeah.
And other things were just catching my interest. So that's the positive side of that, right? I have a bachelor's in fine arts. So I'm learning about lighting and costume design and producing and stage management and all dramaturgy, all of the things. And I'm like, I'm enjoying these classes more than I'm enjoying what my major is.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it came about, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so you have now manifested fully as general manager. You have even your own Mott Fisher production. Am I saying that right? Your own company.
Yes.
You get hired as a general manager. So trace really quick from I'm not acting anymore. I have a dramaturgy degree. I'm still going to work in the theater. I still want to be a creative. I still want to tell stories. But what got you to general manager? And
Yes.
then at that point, let's talk about what the heck a general manager is.
Good point. Okay, that's a great setup. So I should backtrack just a little and say just, back to college. I started my first company when I was in college, and it was a production company, and we did film and theater. And so that's really when I caught the producing bug, which general management is hand in hand with producing. So then I graduated, I moved to New York City, and my best friend, who also graduated from the same program in directing, said, we should start a company. And I said, absolutely not. I am not interested in that. And I have to also say, every major life change I've had, it has been someone else's suggestion. And I have immediately said no and then thought about it. So she said, we should start this company. I said, I don't want to start a theater company. That feels no. just no. Um, but she talked me into it. I started this company with her, and it ended up influencing every step of my career. So the company is called Sanguine Theater Company, small not for profit. We did a lot of, new plays, world premieres, and then we started a playwriting competition where people would send in their plays. We'd pick the top 3 to 5. We would do a night of excerpts of readings, and then people in the audience would vote on their favorite, and we would have to produce whatever they voted for. So that's fun. And it was, they always picked what I wanted, which is great.
Ooh.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So from there, I went to grad school because I sort of reached this because I was producing at Sanguine, and then I sort of reached this place where I said I have taught myself all I can. And yes, I have done quite a bit of producing at this point, but it is, a lot of indie theater. There's a ton I don't know. So I went to grad school at Columbia for theater management and producing, and my world just broke open there in the best way possible. And then from there, graduated. I was very interested in commercial theater instead of not for profit. And my mentor said, there is a job at Barrow Street Theater, which is one of the few commercial off Broadway theaters that was left at the time, as a company manager. And I said, no, I don't want to be a company manager.
Company management is hard. That's a specific personality type right there.
Very, very hard. And I ended up doing it for about 5 years.
Wow. Okay, great. So, because we're throwing all kinds of terms here, we're getting into
Yes.
everyone knows what an actor, director, designer, but company manager, what do they do?
Company manager is a general manager's number 2. They are in charge of all of the company after essentially the producers, directors, designers, everyone leaves, and they are a source of management on a day-to-day basis in the theater. They operate as HR, and they're a bit of a catch-all as well. When I managed Sparrow Street Theater, I managed the theater as well. So every aspect of that venue, I had a responsibility towards, essentially, which is greatly rewarding and is also 6 days a week forever, so it's a
Right.
lot of work, but it taught me so much about how to be a good general manager. I understand this job very thoroughly because of my company management year, you
Yeah.
know.
Great. All right. So you said again, initially said no,
I
but
initially
then
said
5 years as a company manager
yes.
at
So
Barrow Street.
at Barrow Street. So Barrow Street did a production of Sweeney Todd that was immersive. It was insane. We essentially made the theater into a pie shop. We cut down many numbers of the seats. We served pies at the top of show. They were made by Bill Yassis, former White House pastry chef, who
Oh,
was at every single performance. That man is gold. I love him. The pies were amazing. And it was an incredible show. It's the longest running Sweeney Todd of all time. And after that, or about 3/4 of the way through that, Barrow Street Theater lost its lease in the space. Mainly because they're a commercial theater and it was a not-for-profit building, is what I would kind of boil that down to. And Kate, my boss at the time, took me out to lunch and said, let's start a general management firm. And I was like,
no.
no. I was like, I don't know about that. And I thought about it, and she was the best boss of all time and is now currently the best partner of all time. And I said, okay, let's give it a try. From there, before we even left Barrow Street, we'd secured our first 2 clients, and we have not quit since, essentially. And here we are,
And here
6
we
years
are.
later. Yeah.
Now we've arrived. Now, very much like Sean on Hot Ones, we've arrived.
You're right.
I try and emulate him in my interviewing.
I love it. Yes.
They did do Zoom Hot Ones during lockdown. I don't know.
Did they really?
Yeah, they would eat opposite each other on the camera. I might have to
Mm.
work in some food on my podcast.
Yeah, you should. Yeah.
We have arrived. We are now a general manager.
Mhm.
So talk about let's start just on the surface. What does a general manager do? What is your day-to-day like?
So a general manager our tagline at Mott Fisher is we do everything but raise your money. And that is that's pretty true. It's essentially being what I think many people think of as a producer without bringing the money actually in and leaving final decision to producer. So when I get hired, I basically build a company from the ground up, that company being the show. So that requires every level of budgeting, hiring personnel, dealing with the unions, dealing with the venue, dealing with the ticketing agency. Every arm, there's not an arm that I don't touch, including investors. So there's nothing, by the time I leave a show, I know it very intimately. There's really nothing I don't know about it.
Yeah, great. I think so many people don't understand. They go and see a show, it's 2 hours traffic, right? And for every minute on stage that you watch, there were dozens, hundreds of hours of labor put in so many different ways that you never
Wow.
see, right?
I've
Um,
never heard it described like that. I think that's really interesting. And
yeah,
yeah, very true. Very true.
from and not just the rehearsal or design process, but down to everyone working at home on their own lines, on their own time. Everything you do, like you said, working like we were here just in Florida, we go in New York, all the laws are different. All the union stuff is different.
Yeah.
All of the hours and regulations, and can you actually get that? Can we get that grant? Well, we don't have a headquarters in New York. I mean, all those little loopholes and red tape things, that's kind of your place to help navigate all the choppy waters that inevitably come up when you're trying to sail a show through the sea.
It's funny. Yeah, that is very true. And a lot, my job is sometimes so tedious and not low stakes, but like it's a lot of paper
Yeah,
pushing. And then the other half of it is so incredibly high stakes. It's insane. Like if this negotiation with this agent goes wrong, we are going to lose this star. If we lose this star, the deposit on the theater does not matter.
right.
And so it can be, I live in both worlds simultaneously.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
So that business side, I think people can wrap their minds around pretty straightforward, cut and dried. But talk about, because you mentioned this a little bit a little while ago early on, the creative side of your job, like in terms of the storytelling. Because again, that's what I really want to focus on in this particular podcast is how does Karly, general manager, tie herself to the storytelling? Like, do people typically ask for artistic input from you? Is the art impacted by some of the decisions you have to make on the business side? When you are there watching a preview or watching a rehearsal, what do you see your role as in terms of the story?
Yeah, that's interesting. That is so honestly, the most creative thing that I'm proud of is the creative problem solving that I do, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's a lot of, I always joke that somebody should put on my tombstone, I have an idea. Because I'm always like, okay, this is a problem I've not seen. Okay, I have an idea. I have an idea. We'll see if it works. It might be crazy. But it's, as far as storytelling goes, yes. So people occasionally do key into me about what do you think about this thing, especially in new works, et cetera, et cetera. I generally lay low though. I let people do their thing. I do have a habit also though of, especially when I love pieces to, and I see these pieces a lot in previews, in rehearsal, in tech. I will always die on a hill, right? If they cut a piece that I love, I'll whisper in someone's ear or whatever, right? That's because I become very attached to those pieces and to those moments that sort of make me tick. And then, yes, there is a lot of art that gets sort of dictated by money, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it was Anne Bogart that said something along the lines of great art comes from limitations.
Yeah.
And I think that that is 100% true in theater. And anytime I see a producer creating not necessarily an over bloated budget, but maybe an over personneled budget, it makes me ask, what are we overcompensating for here?
Yeah.
Right? What are we missing art wise that we think we need this many voices in the room? Yeah. Does that kind of answer the question?
Oh, absolutely. That's fantastic. How do you think you're having done some acting, having been trained in that too, does that eye that experience help even just speaking the language of the people you're dealing with? I mean, business people and artists can often speak very different languages. It's almost like you can be a mediator or a translator sometimes too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, I since I have such a really specific background in theater, I have a good eye for things. Of course, I have my own personal taste, but you're right about vocabulary. And even though we are all speaking a theatrical vocabulary, even on this more nuanced level, actors are speaking it differently than designers, than directors, and whatnot. And you really have to know how to, not just vocabulary, but, sort of personality wise, approach people, I'd say.
Karly, I want to do one more little tag on the general manager angle here before I move on to a couple of things I heard you say I want to ask about. But you had mentioned to me, you didn't give it away, but in our prep, you said you had a good story about chickens
Oh,
that
yeah.
had to do with general management.
Oh,
And
yes.
I'm very intrigued. I'm guessing it's not chicken wings or hot ones again, but it's,
No, no, it's not. So when I say that we do everything but raise your money, a good example I have of that, and this happens on every show, by the way, there is some level of this thing happening that whose job is this ends up being my job sort of situation.
yeah, of course.
So I did a show 2 years ago at Cherry Lane Theater. It was the last show in their main stage before they sold the space. And it involved a live baby chick at the end. And it was a reveal and it was a beautiful moment. And so therefore we had to have 3 baby chicks on hand at any given time. And they grow very quickly and they
Yeah.
love theater, and they had a wrangler who was, also did other things, but he had a job of watching them. And I get a call one day that says this is very sad, that all 3 have died.
Oh,
And we learned something I've learned about chickens now is that that's sort of, it was like a batch of them that were sort of, it wasn't anything we did. This was going to happen regardless, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, okay, so we need to find replacements. The only replacements we could find day of that were open before show were deep in New Jersey. And so I drove out about an hour and a half to pick up these baby chicks, put them in the car, and the person says to me as they're leaving, and this is September, so it's mild weather, whatever. Listen, they need to be in like 90-degree heat. They need to be warm. So I drove an hour and a half back to New York City, blasting my heater with baby chicks in a box riding in my front seat. Hand to God.
oh
Isn't that
my-
crazy? That's my life, That's what
yeah.
you know?
We'll do everything but raise the money. We'll even get you baby chicks
I'll
at
even
90
get
degrees. Oh
Yes.
my
Oh my I'm, like, sweating thinking about that day. So awful. Those baby chicks are still alive, though. My business partner, Kate, she has a farm upstate, and she basically inherited all of these stage chicks, and they're free range loving life.
I'm gonna call you like in 6 months and say, "Karly, we need to start an egg production firm." You're gonna
Seriously.
say, "No."
No.
Speaking of no, this I did. I'm curious. I'm curious if this hardwiring in you, Karly, to kind of dig the feet in on the initial idea.
Mm,
Because there's personality types, right? There's the directors who like just the big ideas, and they need someone to say no
mm.
before they can actually analyze the big idea, right? I need to have a monsoon on stage, and it has to be real water, and I want 75 elephants, and no. I have an idea. I'm wondering if this no thing is kind of just part of your personality and maybe is part of what makes you a good general manager? Do you think they go
No.
together?
No, sorry. No, actually, I am very much a big ideas person, and here's the Leo in me. I like the idea to be mine. So
Okay.
when other people bring it to me, my initial reaction is, and then I think about it, right? So it's not. In fact, I would say one of my greatest strengths as a GM that I think if I didn't have as much experience as I do, I would not be able to pull off is that I don't immediately say no. In
Uh,
fact, I'm very much about entertaining ideas. I learned that lesson a few years ago on Sweeney when everything they did I thought was going to, I was like, there's no way. How? And they not only pulled it off, but beautifully. And I thought, that's art. That's taking that risk is art. And as for me, as long as we can make it work money wise, as long as we're safe, yeah, let's try it.
awesome. Something else you were talking about in the first segment, a couple times you mentioned the terms like commercial, not for profit. Again, this is something that all of us in it, we know it's a shorthand, but I think a lot of people who are more like listeners, audience members may not understand exactly what that differentiation is. Could you talk about commercial versus nonprofit, what your company tends to focus on? Because I know Clouds Like Me was a nonprofit gig.
Yes.
How does commercial versus nonprofit impact your job? Do you have a preference? I think you mentioned you wanted to do commercial, and why was this? So just kind of a big ramp for you to talk about commercial, not for profit,
Yeah.
and where you land there.
Yes. So commercial theater is actually, let me start with not for profit. That's easier. A not for profit is, it's 501(c)(3). It's recognized by the government as a charity. They can accept donations. They don't pay taxes on lots of things. And generally, excuse me, always a not for profit has a mission. And generally, they are an institution they need to serve their mission, but they also serve a community, essentially. Whether that be subscribers on the Upper West Side or a theater church group in Oklahoma. That's sort of their MO. And they create sort of this, I don't want to use the word community again, but they create a community and they make art from there. A commercial venture is a little bit like it sounds, where you individually you create a company, you put a show up, the ticket sales are yours to keep, you cannot take donations, and traditionally it's a one-off, right? It's actually, in my opinion, more difficult than a big institution because you're creating a company every time. Even though Clowns Like Me has Lifeline, I'm still creating all of the, not just big things, but the little things like workers' comp and unemployment insurance. All of those little things are happening here. So, not for profit is, everything is tax deductible. If you lose, you don't really lose your money, you're donating your money and that sort of thing. In commercial theater, you can just absolutely lose your shirt, right? So, and that can mean closing early. That can mean, somebody never wants to invest again, the stakes are really high in commercial theater, which is something that I really like, but also to me, I think that not for profit is a godsend. I think it's so important. I think that serving a mission, what a high calling, right? But for me to create art because you think that the masses are going to like it is such an interesting, fun idea. And that's generally what I do for a living, right? So you're right. Lifeline, this Clowns Like Me is not for profit. That's not normally my bread and butter, but I took it because I was really passionate about this specific project,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
we have GM'd for not for profits, like bigger ones, especially if they're searching for their forever GM. Kate and I will sort of step in, interim, that kind of thing. But I live for the commercial.
That's great, Carly. Thank you for specifying that for everybody. And I want to dig in a little bit. You've mentioned your partner, former boss,
Mhm.
Kate Morrow, several times.
Mhm.
And I think I'm reading this right, that in terms of a GM team, you're the only all-female general management team in New York City and maybe anywhere.
I don't know about anywhere, but I'm 99% sure that we are in New York City. And things pop up all the time. People create companies all the time. Somebody's going to come out of the woodwork someday and tell me I'm wrong, and I very much look forward to that day. But as of now, I believe it's just us. It is predominantly a male field for whatever reason, especially in the commercial realm. I think that there is a world that there is a GM, maybe CM female team at one of the big not-for-profit institutions, but I don't know. But I do know, as far as a commercial engagement general manager goes, I don't know of any other all-female team.
So are you the tip of the spear? Is this something that was part? partly intentional? Was it just kind of the happenstance that the two of you clicked on the previous gig and just
That.
launched for it? It wasn't like we're going to do this because of this. It's just we're going to do this because we want to do it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I met, so Kate interviewed me for the company manager job years and years ago. And I left that interview. I called my husband and I said, I don't know if I got this job, but I want to be friends with this woman.
Yeah.
Amazing. And then she hired me the next day and we work so well together. It wasn't even, once I wrapped my head around once again starting another company, I thought, okay, I mean, there's nobody better to do it with.
Yeah. Without throwing people under the bus, has being an all-female company or team ever has that caused obstacles? Does anyone ever comment on it? Is it just kind of a fun fact? Is it
People comment on it a lot. I comment on it a lot, which I think it's just because I think it's interesting. But it's never been a hindrance as far as I can tell. But this is a deeper conversation. But sexism often doesn't show itself directly to the person, right?
right?
So if it
Yeah.
has been a problem, I might not necessarily know that. I will say opportunities have come about because we're a female team. There are certain producers who say,
That
you
want
know,
that.
yeah, well, they say, yeah, diversity is important to me, one, and or this piece, should really be led by a group of women and that sort of thing. So it actually feels a little bit more like it skews the other way
That's
than
so
the negative.
well,
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's
yeah,
fantastic.
for sure, for sure. Agreed, agreed.
So let's because you're going to have these moments. So often a question that often comes up is like your first theater memory or the play that made you want to do plays. Or I was literally just editing for next week, and my guest Michael, who was my buddy Holly, he talked about the moment I knew I wanted to be an actor. We all have those stories. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, since you've been working in theater in so many different capacities, what are your like top 3, 4 or like most meaningful theatrical moments? And it may not be being in the audience, it may be something you were working on or a
Yeah.
relationship you developed or something you offered or learned. Or I'm so curious. It's always the way a story lands on someone can come from so many directions. So I'm curious about how some of these stories have landed on you.
So that's interesting. The things that come to mind almost immediately are the moments that sort of have pulled me back into theater because, as I said, I've been doing this forever. And there have been a few times where it's lost its charm, honestly. And I have thought about doing I could be working for a company that feeds hungry kids, or I could be, you know what I mean? So theater, somehow it just always kind of pulls me back in, and I have one of the best stories I have is a few years ago before the pandemic, Kate and I do a lot of immersive theater. We sort of fell into that because of Sweeney. People started just hiring us for that. And over time, I've just done a ton of it now. But we did a show at the Oculus. So the Oculus is basically it's at One World Trade area and it's the train station sort of hub mall. Santander Bank built a house there and they did an immersive project about domestic violence. So since I don't know, this is really interesting. Santander Bank offers micro loans or micro grants, maybe it is, to women who are in domestic violence situations.
To help them get on their feet and leave. And
Get out.
wow.
So they built this house and then you go in and you put on these headphones and you listen to this woman's story as you go through. It was incredibly moving. I have never experienced anything like it. You get to the end and you walk out and you feel like you're like escaping something, honestly. And you walk out, but you walk into another room and essentially there are counselors just sitting there like, would you like to talk about anything? Right? It's so powerful. Now, it only lasted 3 days, and on the last day, one of the reps from the marketing agency was like telling me, she said, this woman has been sort of coming back every day, but she won't go through. And so they approached her and they said, do you just want to listen, to what you would be listening to inside? And she said, yes. And she had a child with her. So she listens and then she takes it off and she says, I need help. And essentially she'd been coming back because she was getting the gist of what it was. And, and she had nothing she didn't even have a phone charger. And this is where my Android phone charger came to save the day. But so I like they rallied around her and got her the help that she needed in that moment, like in live time. And it was so art affecting life. It was fascinating. And it was, I mean, it was beautiful.
This is the power of storytelling, right? That
Yeah.
sometimes you can't talk about yourself, but there's a character, or in this, even just a house, or even just a voice
Yeah.
talking about the thing. You
Mhm.
can address the thing because it's not necessarily, it's that narrative distance,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. Absolutely. Right. Well, and sometimes you need, it's kind of like clowns like me. We sit in these marketing meetings, we say, how do we capture our audience? Who is our audience? And I have always said, if I had any inkling that I might have mental health issues, but I wasn't quite sure, I would seek out a show like this to tell me if I was right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very yeah, and I think the white chip did that too. Like I
Totally.
can people going there and being like, "Do I have a problem?"
Yeah.
Uh, Interesting.
No, White Chip, actually, Sean was a guest on this podcast a few weeks ago, Sean Daniels, and he talked about how after every performance, at least one person came up saying, I need help. And that,
Wow.
yeah, after the first performance, they realized the actors were like, so they had to really quick work up some language, some like QR code, some literature to give to the actors. So the actors were ready to receive these people, right? Because the actors are just actors. Some of them had experience, right? In our case, Scotty, of course, he is so eloquent and able to talk about it because it's his experience. But if you're an actor putting on this in terms of the white chip alcoholic addiction character, and then a person comes to you, it goes back to the power of simply just a storyteller creating that narrative distance, that space for someone to step into to finally address whatever the thing is they need to address. And as storytellers, we can't know. We don't know where each audience member is or what they might be ready or not ready for. We can't
Yeah.
control it or force it. We can only offer.
Praise. Oh, that's so interesting. I mean, this is why theater is some people's church, for sure.
Why so many theaters are built in churches. Why theater came back out of the church after, the other plagues.
1,000%. Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, 1,000%. Wow.
This has been so great, Karly. So much fun and kind of like little mini reunion. I've been gone a couple weeks
I
now, and you're
know.
still up in New York doing the thing with Scotty and Jeff. Uh,
Miss you.
oh, I keep imagining the walks from the that wild East Village apartment up to the theater.
Oh, yeah.
I always like to wrap these up with a couple of questions, some advice, and a little spotlight for you. So this first question is, what is the best advice that you have ever taken?
I thought a lot about this. The first thing that comes to mind, which I feel bad because I've had a lot of really insanely good mentors in my life, but I think of RuPaul saying, "Live from the inside out." And I carry that with me in my heart. I think that's exactly right. Just you live your life for you are the main character. You are
Yeah.
live for what your values and don't take what the outside world has to say unless it applies to you. I think that's beautiful.
No, that's great. My Rebecca, something I blatantly stole from her for one of my writings was, don't ever give anyone else the pen to your story.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Question two. This is one of my favorites. What is the worst advice you've ever given?
Okay, so I thought about this even more because I don't I'm either not a very big advice giver or I don't recall giving very much advice. So I don't know which of those is true, and maybe that's a soul searching moment. But what I landed on, and this is sounds very trite, but I think it's the advice I give people when they ask me for directions in the subway. Because okay, because what will happen is so a lot of people outside of New York might not know this, but when you live in New York City, you have your own track, your own bubble, right? I take the M train in from Marcy to, like that's your like you know everything about that track. And if you go off of it, you can kind of you know, but you don't necessarily know, right? So people will ask me for directions and I want to be helpful and I will say something and then sometimes I'll walk away and I will Google it because I'm like, is what I said right? So for every tourist I've ever sent in the wrong direction, I am very sorry. We'll stop doing that.
What are we doing in Philadelphia? We wanted to see the Empire State Building.
Yeah. That's the one that keeps coming back to mind.
Well, I can imagine. We were there. Actually, again, Rebecca and I saw you. That couple came out. I don't know if you remember this. And they were asking, which train should we take to get to Brooklyn? And
Oh,
you said, and Rebecca and I went, we just, glass eyed. And you said, are you from here? Or where you're from? And they said, we're from Houston. And you went, uh,
that
like you didn't really want to send them on the subway to Brooklyn since they were from Houston, but
that's
they
right.
had,
Well, they had asked, "Is it safe?"
oh,
And
that's
I
right.
and
That's
I
right.
was like, "I can't in good faith tell you yes, and then something happen." You know what I mean? That's what my mind was going, but yeah. But also Brooklyn is very impossible. Like, what part of Brooklyn are you going to? That's a very big question.
Great, Karly. Okay. And again, I will fully admit I stole this from Hot Ones. A spotlight. He calls it a red carpet. I call it a
Oh,
spotlight.
yeah.
Good. What? So a spotlight for you, Karly. What do you have going on? If people want to learn more about you, where can they go? What are your links, your socials, all that stuff? Help us find you.
Amazing. So Mott Fisher Productions, that's Mottfischer. We have a website. You can always contact us there or keep kind of up to date with what we're doing.
Karly, oh my goodness. Thank you so much. What a blast.
Oh my gosh, thank you. It is really good to see you. Please don't be a stranger.
Oh, yeah, no. Hey, I mean, you're a general manager. If someone up there needs a director, you just, you got my number.
I'm on it. I'm on it.
The Page and Stage podcast is built with Alitu, the all-in-one podcasting app created by the amazing team over at thepodcasthost.com. You can learn more about all my guests and access their websites and projects in the episode summaries. If you enjoyed and found value in this podcast, please tell at least one other person. Word of mouth has always been and will always be the best marketing tool in the world. Thank you for listening, and until next time, I'm Jason Cannon, and I cannot wait to hear your story.